Hi everyone, and welcome to my webinar on strengthening key skills to solve common problems in dog agility. My name is Niki Drage, and I am a OneMind Dogs coach from Australia with about 25 years of experience in competing and coaching in dog agility. And in case you're new to the OneMind Dogs method or you just haven't heard much about OneMind Dogs yet, I'm going to give you a very quick overview of where OneMind Dogs started. And basically, our method creator, Janita Lennonen, was competing in agility at a world championship level with this dog, Tekla, that you can see here on the screen, when she suddenly lost her hearing due to sudden onset deafness. And at that time, Janita was using quite a verbal-based handling system, so she completely had to change how she handled Tekla to continue competing in agility, which the two of them loved so much. And basically what she did was a lot of problem solving and trial and error. So if I move this way, if I look here, if I position myself here, how does Tekla respond? And when she did that, she also did the same thing with her students' dogs and her friends' dogs. And out of that, she identified 7 key handling elements that all dogs tend to respond to in a very similar way. She then listed these in order of importance to the dog. And using those, she developed handling techniques where the dog could naturally understand what the handler was asking without the need to teach them a learned verbal command. And these handling techniques, these handling elements in order are our movement, our position, our eyes, our chest, our hands, our feet, our hands, and our voice. And we use those 7 things in a very specific way to make up each of the handling techniques that are in our system. And since then, this was many years ago, so since then the system has developed with many different coaches teaching and learning from students' dogs, and our own dogs. And we continue to develop the system in response to changes in the agility world and in response to things that we learn from dogs. So basically, OneMind Dogs is created by dogs for dogs in a way that all dogs naturally understand it. And we always continue to evolve. And it's now sort of become more of a way of living with our dogs and training our dogs rather than just handling agility. So today we're going to talk about the most common problems that I see in agility as a competitor and as a coach, both online and in person at seminars. The difference between band-aids versus long-term solutions to fix these common problems. Some essential skills that I think that all agility teams should have to make agility easy and successful. How to troubleshoot these common problems and training plans to fix the problems, and then how to maintain the skills and to maintain criteria and the importance of criteria. So firstly, we're going to focus on the common problems that I see in agility. So remembering that agility is teamwork. So the handler's job in agility is to make it easy for the dog to read the course. We have lots of different webinars on this already, and I will link a few of them in the follow-up emails. If you are listening to the recording of this webinar, you can sign up for the follow-up emails using the link below the video. So we're not going to focus on your job as a handler and how that impacts common problems, but today we're focusing on the dog side of the team. So the dog's job in agility is to independently perform the obstacles, which allows the handler to do their job. And there are a few essential basic skills that all dogs must have to be able to independently perform the obstacles in agility. So those are the ones that we will be focusing on. And the most common skill-based problems that I see, so basically problems that come because the dog doesn't have this skill, would be bar knocking, which very commonly happens because the dog is not able to focus on their job of actually performing the jump. They are much more focused on something else, such as the handler running, for example, and that can often lead to knocked bars. There are also many other reasons, and again, we have a whole webinar just on bar knocking, so I won't go too much into detail, but it is based on these common skills. Next one being refusals, which is all to do with obstacle focus. Wide turns or flanking, which basically means the dog running around the outside of all the jumps. And then wide turns, while that very often is because of the issue of timely cues from the handler, it can also be because the dog just doesn't have the skill to collect and turn tight. So we're more focusing on that side of it. The dog turning back to the handler between each obstacle, which sometimes might even look like spinning or barking, and is especially an issue on the run home of a course where the dog often gets ahead and then the handler falls behind and the dog turns around and comes back to the handler. Difficulty turning away from the handler, and especially taking obstacles that are on the other side of the dog than where the handler is. the dog not staying still at the start line, and usually this happens in competition, whereas at home maybe they have a great start line stay. Inconsistent contacts again in the ring versus at home. Missing criteria when the handler runs. This is a huge one that I see so often, especially with my students, because I have a lot of students that train online a lot, and because a lot of them live far away from having common access to an agility club or a trainer, for example, they will train at home and work on basic skills, but they tend to then get a bit lazy. And I'm very much doing this myself sometimes too, where you just sort of stand and send the dog and then throw your reward. And so the dog has a great understanding of the skill when the handler is just standing there, or even just walking maybe, because the backyard is not that big. But when you're on a large course and you're running full speed, suddenly it looks completely different for our dogs. And we really have to understand how to prepare our dogs to be able to do those same skills when we are moving and when we are running. So if you have a dog that can send 20 meters away to the weaves at home when you're standing on your veranda, for example, but in the ring misses the entry every time, that is probably the reason, because you are running with them versus you are standing there and sending them. And that makes such a difference from the dog's point of view. Only being able to weave when the handler is on a specific side, for example, is a very common issue, and the dog running only at the handler speed and not passing the handler and doing obstacles on their own. So those would be the most common skill-based problems that I see as a coach. Now, why do we see these problems? Because of gaps in the dog's basic foundation skills. So even sometimes the dog has been taught the skill, but maybe once, and then the handlers thought, yep, okay, let's move on to the next thing, because sometimes foundation skills can be a little bit boring, especially for us handlers when, you know, there's lots of exciting stuff to get to after. And also, especially if you're newer to the sport, because you don't quite understand yet how important those foundation skills are. And it's much more fun to go and run a whole course or do the dog walk or the A-frame or learn the weaves, for example, and to go and get in the ring. And generally, we're quite impatient to get in the ring. So we tend to not enforce these foundation skills as much as we really should. And it's very often overlooked how important these are. I'm currently training a young dog. She is now 14 months old. And really all I have done is focused on these basic foundation skills that I'm about to talk about, because I know that once she has them, I know what I'm doing with my body language, because I've had a lot of dogs and I've done a lot of OneMind Dogs handling. So for me, the handling side of it is super easy. Like, the techniques are the easy part. The hard part is getting the dog to have those basic skills that they will perform the obstacle so that I'm able to handle effectively. So that is the bit that I focus on, not the fancy handling side, but much more these basic skills that allow me to do that fancier stuff later on. So the fix basically is to focus on those foundation exercises that we're about to talk about, to have patience with these common problems, because especially once you have them, fixing them does require a lot of patience, and to be consistent in your criteria and your training. So we're going to talk a bit about band-aids versus long-term solutions. So the band-aid solution is the most common choice when trying to fix any of these problems. So basically, a band-aid solution is, for example, changing your handling to manage gaps in the dog's skills. And that's usually detrimental to your overall handling plan. And I see this so often in competition, but also in seminars or when I'm teaching, where, for example, I will say, you know, we're going to do a reverse spin, and I want you to do it as soon as your dog commits to the jump, and then you can get moving to the next section of the course. And then what the handler will do is they'll run right up to the jump and wait till the dog has taken off for the jump before they actually do the reverse spin. And when I asked them why they waited so long to give the cue, they said, oh, because if I do it any earlier, the dog will pull off the jump. So then basically that's an example of a band-aid. So instead of fixing the dog pulling off the jump, you're just over-handling the jump to make them do it correctly. And the reason that's detrimental is because now you're having to run up to every jump with your dog, and you are then stuck there. And then you can't give the timely information that your dog needs that makes agility easy for the dog. So this is something that is so common because it's a quick and easy fix. Also, delaying your handling to make sure that the dog actually does the obstacle. So this is most common with things like front cross, where you'll wait for the dog to land and then try to turn the dog around the obstacle. Whereas for the dog, it is much easier and builds a lot more confidence that they know where they're going if you give all the information before they take off. But yes, by doing that, to start with, they may well pull off. But that's something that you can fix, which I will explain how later, rather than just delaying your handling and basically overhandling every obstacle. Also, avoiding ideal handling options or lines. So sometimes people will choose to wrap a jump even though it is a much longer line and an awkward angle towards the next obstacle. And when I ask them why, it's often because they just don't have an option to slice it. They don't know how to slice it when they're on a certain side or behind the dog. And this is a bit about the skill of teaching your dog how to pass you on the course and how to focus on obstacles so that you have a lot more handling options in your toolbox, so that you always have a solution to every single line that you would like to handle for the dog. Managing obstacles, even if it puts you behind or on the wrong side. So this looks like only weaving on one side because that's the only side your dog knows how to weave on, with you on your right, on their right, for example, or having to run to the end of the dog walk and stop so that your dog will stop for the contact. So that's managing the obstacles. And yes, again, it's a band-aid solution. It fixes the problem. You get a clear round. But let's say there's a time when after that you have to do a straight tunnel and a backside send. You don't want to be waiting at the end of the dog walk so your dog can do the contact, because then you're never going to make the backside send after the straight tunnel. So that's a situation where you would like to be able to just trust that your dog will independently do that obstacle and you can continue moving. And as agility courses evolve, this is even more important because courses these days are very much relying on you being able to handle from more of a distance and you being able to trust your skills and allow your dog to do the obstacles while you move ahead to keep giving information. The more that you use band-aid solutions, the more difficult agility is going to become for you. So if you feel like agility is getting harder and harder, generally this is the reason, because you've been getting through fine, but with band-aid solutions rather than fixing those individual skills. Also avoiding certain courses or judges because you know that your team doesn't have the skills yet to be able to do those things. And for example, slingshot or running starts rather than training a start line stay. They're all common band-aid solutions that I see a lot. And I also was very guilty of these with my first few dogs. But since then, I have learnt the importance of long-term solutions and that it just makes everything so much easier. So the long-term solutions are what I would call the real fix. So strengthening the basic skills that make up that issue that you are having to fix that gap in the dog skill set. And then it's something that's fixed basically permanently. Like there is the requirement of maintenance of the skill, for example, and testing that the dog still has the skill. But once it's fixed and you believe that it's fixed in yourself and you have that confidence, agility becomes a lot easier. And then step 2 of the real fix is to expect and maintain the same criteria in the ring. This is very difficult for most people, especially if you live far away from competitions, you can't compete often, or you are new to agility. It is very hard to forfeit a run to maintain your criteria. And I totally get that, and I totally empathize with that, but it is so important because it does make agility so much more enjoyable and less frustrating for you both. So a real long-term fix that allows you to also make better handling plans on the course because you have confidence that your dog has the skill and you can leave them to do their job and you can do your job. And that will just make your runs a lot more seamless together on the course. Anyone who has seen me run in agility very often says like, oh, you make it look so easy, or you're so calm, or you don't even run very hard. It's just smooth. And it's because I have worked so hard to build those basic skills that I have complete confidence that my dogs will do those obstacles independently by themselves, and I can be calm in my mind and just focus on giving the correct information at the correct time. And that makes agility so much more enjoyable if you can get to that stage. So it does require time because building those skills does require some time, and also testing them in the ring. It requires maintenance and patience. So one very basic example of this would be a dog that I had a few years ago, Flo, who was a Staffy Border Collie cross. She was an amazing agility dog, very successful, but once every 6 to 8 months, she would decide to break her start line. And it was like a test, because at the start, I sort of let her get away with it a few times, which was a huge mistake because I was so keen to just run the courses. And her start line fell apart, and I didn't have that option because she was extremely fast, and I don't like to run very fast. So I had to basically go back and retrain it, be very strict on my criteria, and just say, if you break your start line, we don't get to play anymore. We're going to leave the ring. and we will try again next run. And basically, like, I had to do that at the start, probably 4 or 5 runs in a row until she stopped trying to push it and held her start line the same way that she did at home. But for the rest of her career, every 6 to 8 months, she would break her start line and just try her luck. And I would stop her, put her back, and then she wouldn't do it again for the next 6 to 8 months. So it was just one of those skills that required maintenance because every now and then she would push it. But because I knew that if she pushed it, I would always take her straight back. And that was so clear in my mind at this point. I still had the confidence that her start line was amazing. And I would just put her there and lead out as long as I needed to without even worrying about it at all. Whereas if you're like, oh, if they're going to break, I'm just going to run and try to get a clear out anyway, then you start to get nervous and you lead out sort of like hesitantly, and the dog picks up on that and it all just snowballs into a big start line stay issue. So you just have to have the confidence. Yes, they have this skill. Yes, they know what the criteria is. I'm just going to expect it. If it doesn't happen, that's fine. Then we take them out, and then next run we will make it happen. And that's sort of the attitude that will give you that calmness in your mind, and for the whole run then as well. And as I said, it can be very mentally challenging, especially when you're new to the sport and you're just so keen to run the course, and you're still learning all the other mental aspects of agility, of which there are a lot. And this is one that's a little more difficult to deal with. So please don't feel bad at all if you yourself are guilty of this. It is so common. And it took me my first 2 dogs before I really started realizing the importance of this, and how much it makes a difference to your overall mental game, both for you and the dog. Because please don't underestimate how much your confidence in the ring affects your dog's confidence in the ring. If you know that they have this skill and you trust them to have this skill and you rely on the skill, and you show that outwardly, your dog picks up on that feeling as well, and they themselves get more confident in you and in themselves. So one of Janita's, like, my favorite quotes that Janita said to me during a seminar was, would you rather manage the course to run on the specific side of the weaves for the next 8 years, or would you rather just fix the problem? And it wasn't actually to me, it was to a student when I was watching a seminar. And I was really able to focus on what she was teaching. And this student was like trying to figure out how they could get to the other side of the dog's line in this part of the course to manage the weave entry, because the dog has much better weaves on a certain side. And she was asking Yanni like, should I do a blind or a rear, or how could I do this? And she said, well, you don't, you just run on this side. And she's like, yeah, but the dog can't do the weaves on that side. And that's when she said, well, would you rather manage your courses for the next 8 years and do a less than ideal handling or less than ideal line to try and manage the issue, or just fix it? And yes, just fixing it might mean going back to basics, really pushing the distractions, not accepting it if the dog doesn't complete them in the ring, all that sort of stuff. And this requires troubleshooting and getting down to the basic foundation skill that's causing issues with your weaves on a certain side, but it's fixable. Everything is fixable. And even if you feel like, oh, I don't know how to fix it, it's not possible, there's always somebody who can help you. So that's also what we're here for, and why I think Agility Premium is so valuable, because our premium members can come to us with any issue that they're having. Usually we ask them to send a video, so because when they say, I'm having this issue, and we say, send us a video, generally on the video, I'll go, no, you're not having that issue at all. You're having a completely different issue that's causing this problem, but you might not see it. So it's one of those iceberg situations where the problem is the dog pops the 10th pole, and that's the tiny bit at the top of the iceberg. But underneath, the dog can't cope with the handler running. The dog has problems with lead leg changes. The dog has problems with distraction. Like, there's always a other thing that is leading to that problem that we can easily recognize because we teach hundreds of students for many, many years. So we see all the problems very regularly. But a new handler might not be able to recognize that by themselves. So it's really important to get that help and be able to fix that problem so you're not having to manage it. So now I just want to talk about some essential skills that I think that all teams should have to be able to make agility easy for you and for the dog. And they solve a lot of these common problems. So the first one would be obstacle focus. So basically this is about building the value for the obstacles for your dog. So helping your dog to be focused on taking the obstacles, and you want them to want to take the obstacles because they have some perceived value in taking the obstacle. And we build that by rewarding at the obstacles. So usually when people have these issues where the dog turns back to them between each jump or pulls off jumps, they most often reward from the hand or a food pouch. And that's the very start of that issue. Whereas if my dog was like that, or even if my dog is new, going back to this new dog I'm training now, who's 14 months old, Inky, some of you may have seen her. She's a little tiny, cute dog. Especially with small dogs, they tend to be much more handler focused just because they're smaller and the handler's right next to them and the obstacles are quite far away. And they don't land almost on top of them like a large dog does. So it's much more important for me at this stage to build really high obstacle focus for Inky. So the first 6 months of me teaching her obstacles, which has basically been from about 6 months to 12 months, we've been looking at like jumps with a bar on the ground, things like that, tunnels. I've been rewarding on her line between the obstacles, not from me. I reward from me for other things so that she still builds that value from being with me. For example, if we're going on a walk and there's another dog, I might reward from me to have the focus on me. But in agility, we are rewarding only between obstacles or behind obstacles. Or for example, after a front cross, I will throw the toy on her line, but always the reward is at the obstacle because I want her value for obstacles to be so high that she would rather go to an obstacle than come to me. And once she's at that point, then it makes novice very easy because novice is basically go to obstacles on your line. And I will tell you when we're turning. And there's not that many trap obstacles. So when you have high obstacle focus, getting through novice is much more simple. And then as they start to get to the higher levels and there's more trap obstacles and more options and the course is not so obvious, then I'll build in a lot more handler focus again. And that will come by handling from me after turns and during handling and things like that. But at the start, you want that obstacle focus so high. Then the next one would be the forward send and passing the handler. So this is the dog's ability to go faster than the handler and to send them to an obstacle where they will continue forward unless I tell them otherwise. And then being confident to complete the obstacle, even if it means having to pass the handler. So, for example, this is very important with the dog walk or the weaves. If you are behind, the dog should still continue to the end of the obstacle by themselves, no matter what you are doing. Also, again, the run home on a course where there might be 3 straight jumps and you're behind, the dog needs to have that confidence to drive that whole line of jumps, even if you're not there. The next one would be tolerating handler movement. So again, this is a huge one. I spoke about this before with people training at home, just standing or walking and sending their dog places. And then suddenly on a course, when they're running a full large course, they're sprinting and the dog is like, what is going on? And so focused on the handler running suddenly that they don't focus on their job of taking the obstacles anymore. And very often this will look like dogs flanking, running around obstacles like I spoke about earlier, or dogs suddenly not being able to get their weave entries, like they might hit the first gap and then just blast past the weaves, or they might enter in the third or fourth pole because they can't focus on getting into the weaves correctly while somebody is running and putting pressure on next to them. And they might suddenly have super wide turns because the harder you run, the wider your dog runs from you. This is just a basic dog's rule to do with movement. You will learn many of these dogs rules during OneMind Dogs because we have learnt them from dogs and we will tell you them. But basically, the faster the handler moves, the wider the dog runs from the handler. And if you haven't been practicing with you running at home, then your dog will suddenly run much wider on the course and that will throw everything out. So it's so important that you teach your dog to tolerate that movement. And it's also movement away from things. So if you send them to a jump and you start running in the opposite direction, your dog has to be able to tolerate staying committed to that jump and taking it rather than chasing you in the opposite direction. So that's also a very important skill that we teach. Independent obstacle performance. So that basically means when your dog starts the obstacle, they must perform it successfully and complete it no matter what you do. You should be able to do a cartwheel and your dog should do the entire dog walk, A-frame, weaves, tunnel, jump, without knocking the bar or jumping off the side or stopping suddenly. So you should be completely not important for the dog once they are doing an obstacle. They should be able to perform the entire obstacle regardless. And we teach that with things like distraction training. And rewarding at the obstacle again as well. Lead changes away from the handler. So the younger you teach the dog to do lead changes away from you, the easier it is for them later on. This often looks like, for example, in a serpentine, between the second jump and the third jump, the dog needs to do a lead change away from the handler. And very often the dogs will just bypass either the second jump on the takeoff side or the third jump on the landing side of the second jump. Because they don't have the ability to turn away from the handler. This will also show up in weaves where if you have the dog on your left, they are not able to enter the weaves because they don't know how to lead change away from you to get into the weaves. So lead changes are something that are also very important in handling techniques. So an important skill to learn early on. Impulse control, and that basically will also revolve around the dog being able to stay at the start line and hold their contacts and enter weaves, even if the handler is running backwards, running sideways, spinning in circles. There's a dog barking in the ring, there's a judge running next to you, all that stuff. They have to be able to tolerate those things and be able to control their impulse to want to run or go or anything like that. So that's something we focus on a lot during foundations. And following the handling, which basically means the dog being able to listening to you and following your directions despite there being something they really want. That's like a tunnel. That's also something that we teach very early on. So the answer to all of these skills is foundations. So I'm going to show you a little screen recording. So this is a example of our learning platform. So this is what you will see if you are learning online at app.oneminddogs.com. And this is our Foundation for Agility program, this first one. So when you first log in, you go to Start Training in the menu and up the top there. And when you click Start Training, you come to this page and you scroll down to Foundation for Agility and click Start Practicing. And you will see that all of the skills that I just talked about are in this foundation program. So there's 77 lessons. And basically, some of you may think, oh, I've already got this skill. But if you do this program, I highly recommend that you still do each lesson and try it at least once. If your dog nails it, no problem, then yes, move on to the next one. But if you have a bit of trouble with that, then you have identified a basic skill that you need to strengthen before moving on. So you can see here already, we start straight away with sending forward on the flat. And that's that ability to pass the handler and focus forward. And again, straight away, we start without handler movement and then we add that handler movement because that is so important and so commonly missed because people just don't think they need to run at home because it's a small space. But again, you'll miss that basic skill. Offering a jump is a very powerful exercise for building obstacle focus. Lap turn on the flat is your start to handling lead changes and getting your dog to lead change away from you. Following the handling, so that's again listening to the handler rather than doing the obstacles that they want to do only. Keeping commitment, again being able to tolerate that handler movement. 2 on 2 off position basics is that maintaining that criteria and that impulse control. Walking on different surfaces, distractions. Lateral push is again being able to move away from the handler and focus forward on an obstacle. Handling lead changes. So each one of these exercises comes back to those basic skills that I spoke about. And when you do this video, when you look at the video, it goes through the basic parts of the exercise. It explains why you're doing the exercise. And then if you go here, it will show you with a real puppy. So we basically invited puppies to our video studio that had never done these exercises so that you can really see what it looks like when a brand new puppy does this. And we talk through how the exercise works and show you a video of it. After that, it focuses on the real details of the exercise, all the important bits. I'm just skipping through because otherwise we'll be here for a while. But you can see it really breaks it down, so you basically can't go wrong. And then even shows you some graphics to make it even more clear. And then underneath the video, you also get what you need, the goals, and then a summary of the lesson and common troubleshooting. So what to do if your dog doesn't do these basic things. Also, our chat bubble is here, so you can ask us questions if the lesson isn't working for you or there's any issues. So that gives you a basic overview of how we teach each of these skills. And in our follow-up emails to this presentation, I will also include a link to each of the exercises that I'm recommending during this presentation, so that you can go and have a look at them if you're interested in that. The foundation program is €9 per month, so it's a very affordable program to learn these basic skills that I think that all teams should have. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how to troubleshoot these skills or these issues and some training plans for you. So if you have trouble with some things, but you're not really able to recognize exactly what at this point, or things are just not working and you're not getting clear rounds, I highly recommend that you keep a journal of the things that are going wrong. So after each competition or each training session, just write down what happened. And you might actually notice eventually that there's a pattern. Even if you don't notice it, you can ask somebody more experienced, a friend or a coach, and just say, hey, this keeps happening. I've had this issue when I do this. And then they might be able to recognize a skill for you that you need to work on. I also highly recommend that you video your training and review it yourself, because you will see a lot that you didn't see live while you were training. Like you might say, oh, actually, I was turning that way, or I was doing this, or the dog was pulling off every time I moved away. So those things are really important. But also, it means if you're having a regular problem, you can send it to somebody again, like us, and say, hey, this happened and I don't know why. Can you please help me and recognize what happened? So that's the most important part of troubleshooting. The other thing is to always think from your dog's perspective. So that's basically what OneMind Dogs is all about. Like, we think about how the dog sees things and how the dog naturally reacts to what we do. So if something goes wrong twice, we always stop and think about, okay, why is it going wrong? What does the dog need from me? Do they need more information? Am I not making it clear what I want? Or do I need to strengthen a skill that they don't have that will fix it? And then you fix these things before you ask the dog to do it again. Otherwise, you just end up with frustration and nobody's having fun. So twice is definitely my limit. If I am teaching weaves and my dog doesn't get it twice, okay, stop, make it easier, change something. And that's how you keep the dog motivated and enjoying themselves. If things are easy at home but hard at a competition, then think about, like, what's the underlying reason from your dog's point of view? Is it your movement suddenly at a competition, or the fact that it's a larger full course with more obstacles? Is it that your criteria is lower at a competition because you're nervous or you just want to keep running? Is it that you're stressed or your dog is stressed because there's other people watching you, there's other dogs around? Is it that there's a distraction going on? But you need to identify which of those points is having the biggest impact, and then work on that skill. So the training plans to work on these skills is, first of all, to focus on always fixing the problem rather than avoiding it. As we spoke about before, focus on long-term solutions, not band-aids, because this is the best and easiest solution in the long run that will give you the nicest, most confident and seamless feeling runs later on. And it builds trust and confidence for both you and the dog. If you trust that your dog has the skills to do what you've asked, then you will handle more confidently, and the dog will have more confidence in you and in themselves and in enjoying the game. And it also reduces that frustration from both of you. The dog will get frustrated if they don't understand something. You will get frustrated if you don't know why they're not doing stuff. And that's never a good combination. So if you're feeling like you're at that stage, then go back and troubleshoot, identify your problem, and fix the problem, rather than constantly trying to just avoid it or handle around it. So an example is fixing your dog's obstacle commitment so that you're able to leave the obstacle earlier and handle the next section of the course, thereby giving your dog earlier information so that you're both more confident about where you're going on the course, and able to do it without a rush. Also, it's important to do these things because it will turn this problem into a strength for your team. So if you think about those basic skills that the dog needs to tackle that problem that you're having, break those down, even list them. You can write down, like, okay, the dog is doing this, these are the skills that are involved in doing this, and see which one of those you have a problem with and strengthen those specific skills. And you can test and push each of those skills to beyond what you're ever going to need, because then you and your dog will have full confidence that both of you can do these skills. And this is something I do as a coach all the time. Like, my students are always running courses that are way harder than what they'll ever see in a competition, because I want to push their skills so hard that when they get to a competition, they go, oh, this is easy, we can do this. And then they have confidence, the dog has confidence, and then it just works much better. So one example is, if the problem is that your dog can only weave when the handler runs on the left next to the dog, rather than the handler can't run ahead or be behind or be lateral, the skills the dog needs to be able to perform the weaves are to be able to tolerate the handler's movement and position, to be able to focus on the obstacle, not on what the handler is doing, to be able to pass the handler in case the handler is behind, the understanding of what weaves are and how to do them, so the criteria, and being able to tolerate any distractions, so dogs barking, judges running, birds flying over. Those are some basic skills that are needed to weave with the handler on both sides. So you can then take each of those individual skills and train them separately, even just on the flat without weaves, and then build them up and then put them into the concept of weaving. And even you could start with 4 poles and work on each of those basic skills on 4 poles, and then on 6 poles, and then on 12 poles, and then in a different place like a park, and then at a friend's place, and then at a training facility, and then in competition, so that you have those skills so high in all those different environments that you basically can't fail, and your dog has much more confidence in weaving and you have more confidence in their ability. So exercises that I think every single training plan should have. Even the most advanced dogs will benefit from going back to these exercises regularly. Focus forward, so rewarding your dog for continuing forward on the course, basically. And even this could look like you have a long line of obstacles and you think, oh, my dog might not go out there by themselves, but let's see. And you run it and they do, that you then throw the toy to the end of the line rather than them running back to you for the reward, or throw your ball with food in it, for example. Jump offering with movement away from the jump. So basically that's you standing next to the jump and your dog offers to go over it. And as they are approaching to offer to go over it, you move away from it. If they stay committed and go over it, you reward at the jump, not from you. Sending around a wing with movement. So again, sending your dog to go around a wing while you run the opposite direction. Following the handling. So that looks like there's food next to the dog, but they first come to you, go around a wing and then get the food, so that their focus is still on following you before they're allowed to get that reward. Towards and away from the handler. So this looks like the dog coming to you when you ask, instead of ignoring you and taking a tunnel, for example, and then turns away from you to an obstacle when you ask. And that's another skill that we teach towards the end of our foundation program, when the dog already has very high obstacle focus. And then specific skills like squaring up for a wrap, for example, which we teach in reverse wrap training. And this is one of those things that, like Flo, that dog I was talking about earlier, with the start line stay thing, she also had a thing where she would slice sometimes when I was asking for a backside wrap, because she would come too close to the wing and just want to go fast. So she wouldn't put in that extra stride to wrap. And I taught her how to do that with the reverse wrap skills that we teach on the website. And she then would nail it, but then every few months she would start going back to pushing it and slicing again. So in the end, I just did it that every 3 or 4 months I would just do a repeat of that foundation exercise of squaring up, and then she would be fine for a long time. And then again, if I would see it weakening, I would just redo that exercise once in my general training plan. So usually my training plans look like 1 session a week. I might do like a full course, and I'll reward still randomly through the course, but I won't be focusing on skills. I'm focusing on running a sequence. Then 1 session might be teaching a new skill, and then 1 session would be maintaining a skill that the dog already has, like what we're talking about now. So maintaining these skills and criteria is so important. So either or training is a great way to keep an eye on your dog's skills. So this means if you have a sequence, you do it once one way and then once a different way. Like you might take one side of a jump and then the other side of a jump in the next rep. So the dog is not patterning and you're making sure that they're following your handling and able to do both sides, or to slice versus wrap, for example, backside versus front side. So that you're just keeping an eye on what they find hard and what they find easy. It's important to train things that are hard. It's very easy when you're training on your own that you just set something that you already know how to do anyway, and you just run through it because it's like you'll succeed and it's enjoyable. But then you don't train those skills that you have issues with. So what I often do is grab a map from somebody else or build a course out of issues that I had at a recent competition, so that I can really train those things we find hard and troubleshoot and find those skills that we need to fix to make them easy. If your dog can do something easily once, don't do it again. Change something every time. So if you do a front cross and your dog nails it, next time do it further away. Move away sooner. Add a distraction. Always put it 1 step further to build those skills. And always reward the skills your dog is weaker on. This is something that I find a lot at club training. When I teach seminars at clubs, what people very often want to do is run the whole sequence and then reward their dog at the end. And it's because they are think that they are then building a great skill for running at a competition, which that is a very individual skill that does need to be trained, that your dog can do a whole course and only get rewarded at the end. But I would train that once a month. To be able to run a full course and just have a reward at the end is something that the dog will learn quite easily, especially if you're gradually building up the amount of obstacles you've done till they get the reward. But it's not something that you need to build on every session. So reward that every now and then, but most of the time you should be rewarding those things your dog finds difficult in that sequence. So if number 2 is a wrap and your dog has trouble with wraps, then you will send from 1 to 2 and move on to 3. But if your dog nailed number 2, you will throw the reward back at them and reward them for, yes, you did that thing that you find hard. Good job. Next time I might even push it a bit further and see if you can do it still, even if I do that. So that you're specifically rewarding all of those things that your dog sometimes finds difficult. So Next time you do a training session at club or at home or anywhere else, I want you to try and identify the parts of the course that your dog is going to find challenging and be prepared to throw a reward in. And if you know yourself and you know that you're not going to be able to stop yourself from running the whole sequence just because you want to see what it feels like to run it clear, for example, give the reward to somebody else, give it to an instructor or a friend and say to them, hey, can you throw it here if my dog does it? Just so you can really focus on building those skills. And you need to maintain these skills, as I said, so test them regularly. If you think, yep, my dog can do that, just make sure every couple of months, push it a little further, see if they can still do it, and then reward it and build it back up if they can't or if they're having trouble. And it's so important to stick to your criteria in the ring. The quickest way to lose a skill in competition is to weaken your criteria. And again, I emphasize, I understand how much you just want to keep running and still possibly get the cue. In that way, agility is a bit like gambling that, you know, if the dog breaks the start line, you still really want to run because you might still get clear and that's, you know, adrenaline. But then you will always have that rushy and unsure feeling together. So, and that skill will be weakened. The more often that you let the dog get away with it, the worse that skill will become. And dogs can easily become ring wise, where they can be perfect at home and can't do it at all in the ring. And that is a dog that's very hard to fix because you can't fix it at home because the issue is in the ring. So you have to then start pulling the dog out of the course or re-asking for whatever the behavior was, or bringing a reward into the ring if you're allowed to do that not for competition, for example. But in the long run, just being firm in your criteria from the start is so worth it, not using those band-aids. And if something doesn't go to plan, don't blame the dog. So it's really important to think of that as information from your dog. So it's your dog saying, I didn't understand this, or I'm not aware I have to hold this criteria, for example. So it's when something goes wrong, just if you're someone who gets easily frustrated, try to internalize the frustration, be happy with your dog, put the dog away, and then you can get frustrated about it and write a diary entry, even if it's angry, big scrolly words. Why didn't they do this? At that point, get all your frustration out because your dog is not there and won't hear it, and it's fine. But during the run and at the end of the run, focus on being happy with your dog because they're just there to have fun with you. They don't know what's going on. So it's more about just, yay, we had a great time, even though we screwed up. That's fine. Put the dog away, then focus on the stuff that went wrong if you want to. And once you have written down those skills, you can also, if it was a handling thing, you can go back through your mind of what should I have done. It's much better in your mind to think about what you should have done instead of what went wrong. Otherwise, next time your mind will go straight back to what went wrong instead of this is what I should do. That's something we discuss a lot more in our mental training webinars. So make sure you have a look at those if you're interested in that. But before you can ask your dog for any criteria, you need to make sure they actually understand it. Do they know how to stay at the start line or on a contact when you are walking, when you are running past them suddenly, when you are ahead of them, when you're beside them, when you're behind them, when another judge is running past them, when a dog is barking at the sidelines? Make sure you train each of those things before you ask your dog for that criteria in a competition. So I want to leave you with the message to also trust those skills. So your job, as I said, is to make it easy for your dog to read the course. So once your dog has these skills and you've fixed all your skill gaps, it's really important that you trust your dog and you trust the skills you've trained and you just focus on giving the dog the timely information and you move on in the course after that you've asked for something. Don't babysit them, just trust and do your job of giving information, and that will make all the difference in your confidence in yourself and your dog when you're running together. So you will all get follow-up emails where I will break down each of the problems and each of the skills I think you should have to solve these problems, and I will give you links to lessons as well. If you're not getting those emails, please message us in the chat bubble and just say, hey, Niki said I get emails and I'm not getting them, and we will sort out. It's usually a subscription issue, so we will sort that out for you. Thanks for coming to this webinar. I really hope you enjoyed it.